I think that the most elusive thing is not how much money can I make? Am I going to feel like it's enough? And I've thought about this a lot, especially coming back from like the 6 month stint I had in Rwanda. So I'll give you my thoughts and I'd love to hear yours on this one. I think there's two components. There's the reality of the situation is, do you actually have enough? And then the bigger part is there's the emotional part, and the mental part is, do you feel like you have enough? I think the tactical part is easier to solve. You talk to a financial advisor, you get the numbers together. It's black or white. Do I have enough? Okay, cool. Let's pretend you do, right?
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Neel Parekh. He escaped the safe path, built a multi-million-dollar remote business while traveling to over 55 countries, and uncovered what it really takes to design a life of freedom. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Most of us were handed a script about money and success before we even knew better. Play it safe, get the good job, don't order the appetizer. And for many, that script became a cage they never escape. But what is safety? Is that the biggest risk of all? Today, I'm joined by Neel Parekh, founder and CEO of the Made This franchise, a multi-million-dollar business run entirely by a remote team. After walking away from a career in private equity, Neel spent 7 years solo backpacking through 55 countries while building a company designed to fund his freedom. Now he's on a mission to help others break free, redefining what it means to have enough, to live on your own terms, and to design a business that gives you financial freedom, time, and location freedom. Isn't that what we all want? If you've ever wondered whether there's more to life than the script you're handed, this conversation will show you how to rewrite it. Let's meet Neel and see how it's done. Welcome to Richer Soul, Neel Parekh. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky. Excited to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
So my parents immigrated from India, so I'm first generation here. My parents, typical immigrant story, right? Came here with $20 in their pocket after knowing each other for like 2 months, decided to come to a brand new country and just grind and make it. I think that immigrant edge adds a lot to the first generation, my generation, in terms of like work ethic, thinking about money. But there's also, there's a safety and scarcity element of that too. So growing up, my parents eventually started video rental stores, if you remember those, Rocky. So my dad had a couple stores called Video Town, had it for 32 years, finally shut it down in end of 2017. So quite a long time. And yes, I grew up around small business, but also having, my parents say, hey, we just want you to have a stable job because we couldn't have a stable job. So please go do something which is safe. Like that was a thought process. And money, it was a scarce commodity, right? We were fine. We're middle class. But at the same time, you ask your mom, hey, could I have $10 on a shirt? It'd be, why do you need $10 on a shirt? Absolutely not. No appetizers. Don't order drinks at the restaurant. Why would you do that? It's only water, right? So like all of those lessons are still in my mind for sure.
Do they still apply, or Can you get the appetizer and the drink now?
I'll be honest, I have a hard time ordering drinks at restaurants. I could absolutely afford it. It's a drink, right? But in my mind, it's like, I don't need this drink. Why should I pay extra? Like, why get the appetizer? So I'll be honest, like, it's still in there, even though logically I know it doesn't matter.
It's amazing how those scripts get written in and they don't necessarily get changed over time
Yeah,
until you break them.
exactly.
The other thing you said was your parents wanted safety for you, which I find parents prefer safety over happiness and enjoyment. And it's that weird thing. That, yes,
Yeah.
be safe. Don't enjoy the appetizer. You'll be good.
Yep.
But that's not necessarily a life worth living, is it?
No, and like, so I made this franchise right now, and a lot of people are interested in franchising. It's their first time into entrepreneurship. So many times they're asking family members on their opinion. And in my opinion, it's one of the worst people to ask because their incentives are to keep you safe, right? Maybe it's for their own benefit of like, hey, I want this person to be safe so I don't have to worry about them. So a lot of the advice they get is keep the normal path, keep the safe path. Why would you do this? And I don't think it comes from a bad place. I just think it comes from a frame of reference of like unknowingly selfish, where like they want you to be good to make themselves feel okay, right? Because they love you and they care for you. So it is interesting how that happens so often. And then you have to realize who you could go to for advice and not many times.
And until you see that and notice it and realize it's going on, it just, you're normal, right? Just like you talked about going to the restaurant. It's just you're normal because this is the way we do things. And until you realize, hey, there are other ways to do things and that might not be it for me.
It's kind of through like exposure therapy. And like, Rocky, I know you go to a lot of conferences and do a lot of self-improvement, but once you're around other people who think differently and you start noticing how they live life and you're like, oh, maybe that's normal. Maybe that's not normal. And honestly, like, so I'm in Los Angeles right now in West Hollywood, and it's a very expensive area in terms of like, you go out to places and I'm like, why would anyone pay $700 for a co-working space? Why would anyone pay this amount of money for these types of things? And my mind's always like, why would you pay that amount of money? This makes no sense. But now I'm starting to realize, oh, it's because like these people operate on a different level. They think about things differently. They were raised differently, right? There's so many different perspectives, especially when it comes to money. A lot of it's how you're raised, but also just exposing yourself to the way other people think and trying that on and saying, yeah, this vibes with my current reality or it doesn't.
That said, I think a lot of people are delusional in the sense that they don't have any concept of how money works.
Yeah.
Or how to live within, I'm not going to call it a constraint or a budget, but let's say live within your means with a little bit of excess so that you aren't always stuck.
I agree with you, especially with American consumerism. It's interesting because I know coming from my background, I probably oversave, right? Like an immigrant background typically has a scarcity mindset when it comes to money. You're probably oversaving. You're not spending too much. So for me, it was almost the opposite of like, I'm probably oversaving, which is great, but that's my frame, right? So for me, it took a while to start spending money. But like to your point, Rocky, I actually agree with you now that you say it, where most people are probably, or a lot of people are probably overspending. They don't really keep an eye on their finances. They think everything's going to be rosy. That's how a lot of people operate.
And I think there is a fine balance between oversaving, saving, and not enjoying life. And we'll explore that as we go through today. But you got to find what works for you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, though, having financial freedom makes a lot of those things kind of worthless. Like, if someone came to you and said, hey, you can have financial freedom, do whatever you want with your life. But the only thing is you can't have appetizers. You're going to have water when you go to the restaurant. You can have whatever you want when you come home. I think people might raise their hand and go, it might be a good trade-off. The problem is people don't always look at the trade-off.
It's funny because like, I'll give you an example of this one. I was in Rwanda, which maybe we'll talk about later, for the last 6 months. And I would get massages there every week because it was very inexpensive, right? And people over there would be like, wow, are you spending so much money on massages and self-care and things like that? And in my mind, I'm like, dude, you're going to bottle service every Friday night. Like, why is it that this type of stuff is seen as expensive versus what people do normally, getting drinks, going to dinner? People don't think about that when it comes to budgeting, right? And it's kind of like, I don't know if you have it on your bookshelf, but Ramit Sethi talks about this all the time with what is your version of a rich life? If you want to spend $300 a month on shoes, go ahead. Just don't order appetizers when you go out to eat. And some people think it's weird to spend $300 on shoes, but reframing it and saying, well, I'm just saving money because I'm not doing what all the normal people are doing. It's the equal trade-off, right? It's hard to rewire that though.
And I'm familiar with his work, and he is correct. Spend on what you love, but don't waste money on what you don't love. I don't know how many people hear the second part of the message. You have to make a choice. You can't do it all. You can have anything. You can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want, right?
Well said. Absolutely.
So, knowing your background, I'm guessing you had to go to college and get a good job, and I'm sure you did that. How did that turn out?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to UC San Diego. So, went to university, and luckily my parents were very not pressuring me. They saw my science scores. They're like, all right, this kid's not going to be a doctor. It's okay. We're not going to push him there. So they were very free flowing. Like they weren't strict with anything. Like go ahead and try it out. But of course, the seed was planted of it's probably wise to get a good job. So after graduating college, I went into finance. So I actually joined a private equity firm and I worked in private equity for 4 years. That was my first job out of college. Moved up to Los Angeles, worked for a company over there, and grinded for a few years.
So private equity has really taken off, I would say, in the last 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they are buying up everything in sight. And I don't think people realize it because it's not like they go out and back in the 80s where they bought RJR and Nabisco and these massive companies.
Yeah.
These private equity are coming in and buying up your local dentist.
Mm-hmm.
They're buying up the local HVAC, the heating and cooling guy. They're buying hospitals. They're buying healthcare systems. And they're buying all the accounting practices too, by the way. They're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people realize there's a downside to that. At least that's what we've seen. And it seems to have to do with the way they behave and what their mindset is. What did you see working inside of the monster, I'll call it?
Yeah. I mean, I think private equity, it's become more, I don't know if mainstream is the right word, but you could have a small private equity shop now. That was unheard of 10, 15 years ago, right? Like you could have a small mom and pop boutique company, which just invest family office money or friends and family money. And, that's private equity, right? When I worked there, over 10 years ago now, almost, it was a big company. I was part of a small group there in the tech private equity group. Honestly, my experience there was really good. Like my bosses and managers, they wanted us to learn. They wanted us to grow. It wasn't like overworked. So I actually had a very positive experience during my time there. Here's the way it works in private equity though. We would raise a fund from people. So investors would give us a pool of money and we would deploy over a certain number of years into companies. Now, management fees are only based off of how much money is actually invested. So let's say we raise a fund for $100 million. We're going to deploy it over 2 years. We need to invest $50 million per year into businesses, right? And the cut for private equity, it's called 2 and 20 is normally how it works. 2% per year management fee, 20% carry, meaning after they guarantee you a certain 8% return, anything above that, they get 20%, you get 80%. That's on average how things work. But here's the thing. We need to deploy $50 million a year. Now, that might be doable if there's a bunch of people working on it, but let's say you raise a fund for $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. Now you have a lot of money to deploy very quickly. So if 2-3 years ago, I don't know if you remember, Rocky, there was people were getting stupid valuations for every single company because there was so much money that private equity companies raised and they had to deploy it. So instead of someone saying, hey, I need $20 million and I have a $100 million valuation, they'd be like, all right, how about we give you 40 at $150 million valuation because we need to deploy our capital. And the way private equity cycles work is they deploy the capital, then they need to sell the companies usually within a 5-year time horizon to get the money back to give to investors, right? So That's the model is you deploy money, usually a 5-year horizon, maybe 7 years, get the money back as quick as you can, give it back to the investors. You notice like what that does is that doesn't set up a lot of companies for long-term success. Now, this is not always the case, right? There's minority investments, growth investments, private equity companies who take over the entire business. But if you think about a small private equity company buying like an HVAC company or a plumbing company, cut cost, increase margins, flip it for a high multiple in 5 years. That's the model, right? And like you said, Rocky, there's a reckoning which comes with that because these companies, at some points, it's not well run, right? It's run off a spreadsheet, and that's not how you run a business. And I think what people don't realize is many times people in private equity and finance, they don't have operating background, right? They're fantastically smart people from Wharton, people from the biggest business schools, but they might not be operators, right? And that's a big difference.
And they have to make a return because if they want to sell it in 5 years for a profit, it's got to show a profit, which means you've got to drive revenue up. And one way to do that is massively increase prices and cut people or cut corners or whatever you have to do to make the business work. And every private equity is different. But what we're seeing now is a lot more of their opportunities going bankrupt because they just don't cash flow or they don't work or they didn't know how to operate that particular business or the economy changes, things happen. And so a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah. And I think people also don't realize like how much money there is out there in terms of investments now. There's a lot of money. Like even if there's an economic downturn, the money still goes somewhere, right? And a lot of that is people raising money and there's funds. So like compared to 10 years ago, now there is so much money which is out there, whether it's being invested or not, but it's a lot more money. What that means is more people are raising funds, more people are deploying funds. People who should not be qualified to deploy funds are now deploying funds, right? So in many cases, this is really bad. You get brand new people who are raising funds who come from some finance background, never operated a business, buying a business in the trades. And this is what I see all the time, Rocky. It's like where things go wrong. They buy a business in the trades where they're like, yeah, good. We're going to implement technology and software and we're going to automate stuff. It's like, dude, like there's a reason why these businesses exist, which are very people intensive and you're working with blue collar labor. It doesn't work as well as people would like.
No, it doesn't. And these days technology gets expensive. Out of curiosity, do you know where all this money has come from?
I have my opinions. Obviously, like government printed a lot of money. A lot of that went to existing business owners. A lot of that went to the top earners, and they're the ones investing in private equity. So it's never been easier. Money right now is maybe a little bit more tight because people are holding it in their bank accounts. But the money, there's more money, which is out there, right? And it could be government printing, could just be the richer got richer. But that's why there's so many private equity funds popping up right now.
Interesting. So you only stayed there 4 years. You decided to leave. What prompted that?
Rocky, during university, I did like a study abroad program and eventually started backpacking around Europe. And my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Like I want to do a gap year. I want to quit my job at some point and do a gap year. And I always thought in my mind, I'll do it after 3 years. I'll do a gap year and then I'll figure out from there what else I want to do. I ended up staying in the job 4 years, more security, like, all right, let me pad my bank account a little bit more to make sure I'm good, things like that. But I always knew I just wanted to quit and travel. That was honestly the biggest impetus is let me take time off and go see the world. So I bought a backpack, booked a one-way flight down to Colombia to South America, quit my job. It was solo backpacking. And I started there. That was the impetus. What ended up happening is, 3 months went by, a year went by. I was like, I don't want to stop. I want to keep going. And it kept going. So I ended up traveling for about 7 years across 60 countries by the end. It just kept going.
That's impressive. And during that time, though, you figured out how to make income while you're gone. We'll get to that. In those travels, though, you've been all over the world. What have you learned or what have you noticed in being in all these different places?
I think a lot of it is just understanding for me. I mean, there's so many lessons, right? I think there's also lessons if you do it solo or not, of how to navigate the world, how to build more confidence, just kind of being about yourself in the world. I think on a personal level, that's probably the biggest lesson I got is I could be happy being by myself, which I think is a skill set to develop. Anyone can, right? But if you're alone in different places, you need to meet people. You need to put yourself out there a little bit more. There's no crutch. You start to be fine with eating food out, going to movies by yourself, things like that, which I think is a valuable skill for anyone to have. What I noticed and probably learned the most would be probably around how the world works and how every country works a little bit differently, right? Like a lot of times when you're born in one country like the US, you think everything works a certain way. You think the money works a certain way. You think customer service works a certain way. And you start to realize when you get out of the US, the system works differently. So societal norms work differently. US is a very individualistic society. Other societies are very different. So you start to understand like, oh wow, like the world, everyone has their own rules. There's certain universal truths of the world, but generally every country has its own norms of how things work. And it's very humbling to understand that, realizing like you don't really know much about the world because every place is so different and it's free to explore. I think that was a beautiful realization at the beginning, is just, unshackling from, hey, this is the world and how it works, to realizing actually, no, it's very free flowing and every country is completely different.
How did you deal with the language barriers?
To be honest, I mean, we're really lucky that we speak English and that's like the global language, like that's the default language for a lot of places. Obviously, in some countries it's harder because they don't learn English growing up, but you get by with what you can, learn basic words in their language. People love it. Point for directions, basic stuff like that. I wasn't having philosophical talks with people from other countries, but I picked up Spanish pretty well, studied it when I was down there. So it wasn't too bad. To honestly, Rock, I'm super excited about these AI tools coming out where, you can plug it into your ear and it translates it for you and you translate back and forth. I cannot wait for that to happen. So let's see what the future holds.
And I think you kind of alluded on it. Money works differently in different parts of the world.
Yeah, I was going to say money in terms of like, I would probably say entrepreneurship and hustle and like the US culture is different. Money in general, like talk about the universal language. It is money. Like that is the driving force of a lot of places. But one thing I found interesting when thinking about money. So I'll give you an example. Like when I started traveling a lot, I started asking people this question is, what is your version of the American dream? Right. In any country I went to, I said, hey, I'm just curious, like, what is your version? And in the US, the American dream would be like big house, big car, family, lots of money. Like that's kind of what the focus is. So I asked someone from Hungary when I was in Budapest, and they said something very similar. Like, I want a stable job. I want, to be able to save. I want to provide for my family. I asked people in Scandinavia, and the answer was so funny. It was almost every single person I asked had the same answer: is my version of American dream is to buy a cabin in the woods and start a nonprofit. I was like, what? And I asked like 5 or 6 people this, and every single one said the exact same thing. And you kind of realize that a lot of people's American dream comes from what their government is like and what they grew up in. For example, in Budapest, a lot of the people I was asking were in a generation where it's just a crossover from the Soviet Union. Soviet Union fell. A lot of it was like communism before. So now they just want stability. They want to have their own money because they grew up in a communist society or their parents grew up in a communist society. In Scandinavia, where the government takes care of everything, they don't need to worry about being poor. So because of that, they're like, I want to go to the woods and open up a nonprofit. In a lot of countries where you can be very poor, including America, the answer is very money driven. It's like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I just thought it was interesting. It's kind of what we talked about at the beginning, Rocky, where you grew up and your upbringing dictates how you think about money. And you don't realize entire societies are built off of this, based off the culture of that country, based off of what happened in recent history. And I'm super curious, like, what are the downstream effects of COVID happening on the US culture, or downstream effects of any economic downturn? And you hear these stories with people from the Great Depression and how the next generation acted because of that. Like, it really does affect the culture of the country.
It does. And the US hasn't seen a downturn in 17 years. So it really affects the way people think. And again, we're so awash in money, as we talked about with private equity, that I don't think people even realize that it's a possibility that we go into a recession. And the reality is it's coming. I don't know if it's today, tomorrow, or 10 years from now, but these are the things that happen. History rhymes. 100 years ago, we were in the roaring 20s. Are we in the roaring 20s again? I don't know. I know what followed it, and it wasn't pretty, but in spite of that, there's a lot of people who made a lot of money during the Great Depression. Fortunes were built, opportunities come. So that's also about how you look at things as well, and how you go about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think US compared to any country I've been to, people call it the land of opportunity for a reason. Like I do think coming to the US, you can be an immigrant and make it all the way up the ladder, right? And it's probably easiest to do in the US compared to anywhere in the world. Like I'll give you an example. You go to India, it's hard to get a loan. If you're going to pay for college, you have to do it in cash. Economic mobility, socioeconomic mobility is harder, right? Because of the way things are done. It's hyper competitive over there. So what people could do in one generation in terms of changing money or socioeconomic status in the US would take 2 or 3 generations in India generally. Now there is a growing middle class there and things are changing, but that situation I gave you for India that's the most common scenario in most countries. Most countries are not like the US from what I've seen, where the mobility exists, the opportunity exists, and also the culture supports that. The American dream culture supports people moving forward and taking risks. That's kind of part of what we see here.
It is. I have noticed a shift in the world, though. I think there was a time where everybody wanted to come to the US.
Yeah.
But what has happened is there is more and more opportunities in other parts of the world, and people don't see the need to necessarily leave to be able to have opportunity. The wealth is being more spread out. So
Yeah.
people are able to stay home and achieve things.
Technology is a great equalizer. So I agree. And I think it's going to happen more and more. You could be in another country and make a ton of money just through online businesses and whatever you do on the internet. So 100% agree.
That also lowers salaries in the United States, which I don't think people realize the other half of, because if you can hire labor across borders to do work that is being done here, then that's going to shift. The wages become equal everywhere. Our cost of living isn't equal everywhere. And so it makes it harder for someone, I think, in the US to have a nicer lifestyle. At the same point, I've noticed when you go to foreign countries, it used to be that, especially in a lot of less developed countries, the dollar went very far. It doesn't go as far as it used to.
You know, it's interesting. I have so my team for my local business made this is everyone's remote. Everyone's in different countries. Everyone recently got a pay decrease because the US dollar fell. Right. So now for the first time I've ever heard, they're asking to be paid in a different currency, which I'm like shocked because it'd be a little bit more stable. Right. So, we're exploring crypto options and things like that. But like you said, it's, the US dollar is not going strong right now. And that has ripple effects across the world.
Until it doesn't. And then they all want US dollars again.
Exactly.
And it depends on the country, because people don't realize there are many countries where it is difficult to move currency.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a big problem. It's probably a big problem in a good chunk of the world. And I don't think people realize that at all.
Yeah. So when I first started traveling aggressively, 2015, I was in Argentina. And back then, the official exchange rate was 1 to 10. Now it's 1 to 1,500, by the way, but it was 1 to 10 back then. And what you would do is you bring US dollars into the country and you'd go to the guys on the street. They're called cambio guys. And they'd be like, hey, cambio. And they want US dollars. So you're like, okay, I'll negotiate a rate with them. It's usually 1 to 15. They take you to like a bathroom and like open up the wall and give you Argentinian pesos. And you give them US dollars for a better exchange rate. It's called the blue chip rate. And I remember that's how it worked in that country, because their currency was not stable at all, that no one wanted to hold on to Argentinian peso. And I went to this hostel in the south part of Argentina at the time, 2015, and I'd pay them. And because the currency back then was not stable, they took the money and converted it straight to Bitcoin back in 2015. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's so interesting. I've heard of Bitcoin, but like, I don't even know how this thing works. So if you imagine, like, that was when the price was $200 for Bitcoin. And this hostel in the middle of nowhere was just saying, our currency sucks. Let's move it to crypto. They probably bought the whole town now, to be honest. But I always think about that, where people get resourceful in different situations when you can't trust the local currency.
You get good exchange rates for dollars in India at the corner too.
Yeah.
And that's a much more developed economy, but that's just the way it kind of works. This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. So how did it go from there to kind of your shift into really looking at self-development and lifestyle design? Was that because you were traveling, or was there something that happened while you traveled that made you kind of relook at life?
Rocky, have you ever read The 4-Hour Workweek or heard of it?
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, there we go. So Tim Ferriss kind of like popularized the concept of lifestyle design, right? Having a lifestyle business to fund whatever you want. And for me at that point in time, it was like, oh my God, the ultimate lifestyle is traveling, laptop lifestyle. So I started to get incepted with, this is my goal. I want that laptop lifestyle. And even when I was at work in private equity, after hours, I'd be on Reddit forums and places looking at how to start a side business to be able to have something while I'm traveling, to have the ultimate digital nomad freedom. That's what I wanted because I read the book and, there was a whole community around building that lifestyle. And so I just started getting more deep into that. That was my first reason for getting entrepreneurship. Oddly, it wasn't like I want to make a ton of money. It was, no, I want Tim Ferriss's life, 4-Hour Workweek. And there's a massive community around this. Like, especially back then, the digital nomad world was growing faster. This was a little bit earlier stages of it. So there was communities of people around the world who were doing the same thing. So when I quit my job to travel, I'd meet up with these people, right? And I'd hit them up on different forums, say, hey, I'm in Medellin. You want to meet up? I'm in Budapest. You want to meet up? I'm in South Africa. Do you want to meet up? And everyone had kind of the same concept as we are building a lifestyle business to fund our lifestyle. And Rocky, as you know, through entrepreneurship, when you get in business, oddly, like the more you level yourself up, the more money you make. Like that's the best part of entrepreneurship in my mind. Like it's a perfect self-development tool because you can't be it's very rare you find a very low-level CEO with a very high-level business. Or the opposite. It's very rare you find a very high-level person with a business which is not flourishing because they're somewhat related. So as I started my lifestyle business, I naturally went into self-development, right? As a reason for improving what I was doing with business. And then you start looking at Tony Robbins stuff. You start looking at other things and it spirals from there. So honestly, I think entrepreneurship is the best self-development tool. It's a forcing function.
I've come to that same conclusion. I never thought about it that way until much later. I was like, oh, wow. Being an entrepreneur is truly a different kind of self-development journey. And I think part of it is you learn to rely solely on yourself to earn income. You're not dependent on anybody. And things are constantly changing. The world is constantly changing. You got to figure stuff out. You're constantly getting left hooks from different things going on. And you have to be able to pivot and deal with it. You talked about your dad having a video rental store. Well, we all know what happened to Blockbuster. And these things, I don't think people realize it's the norm in the world of business that things are constantly being reinvented, changed, and that happens. And so that's a big part of it. I'm not a fan of travel. I like being home, but I have the lifestyle of laptop at home, right? Same concept without the travel.
Yeah.
So the flexibility to do what I want and the freedom. And I think part of that is I've been to a lot of different places. So it's like, yeah, maybe it's not as exciting as when I was young. And the other thing is, and your business, you figured out how to work across time zones. I haven't conquered that one, so to speak. So I like to stay relatively in time zones to the US because that's where most of my work is. But again, at some point that could shift and you never know. But that was, I think, the biggest thing is just realizing that self-development journey. And honestly, the other half of when that came to me, And it's funny you mentioned Tony Robbins. I realized at the Tony Robbins event that the majority of people who showed up and actually did something after the event, they were all business owners. If they
Mm,
weren't a business owner, the chances are that they were there because a business owner drug them along,
yeah.
not because they chose to go there. And it was kind of very enlightening to me to see, wow, if you're not in the world of business, the world of self development doesn't tend to have as strong of an impact, or it's just not as strong of a desire. I don't know why that is, or maybe it's if you go up in higher levels of corporate, it is. But even now, I notice that talking to other people, and it also depends where you are.
Yeah. I do wonder about that. I wonder if being in entrepreneurship and business causes people to want to get into self development, or it's a filter where the people who are already into it in a smaller scale end up going in entrepreneurship to begin with, right? So, yeah, it's hard to know chicken or egg.
I'm not sure. I think what you come to realize, though, very quickly is your employees don't do what you want. And you got to
Yeah.
figure out how to deal with people and how to deal with situations. And you have to be very comfortable being uncertain,
Yeah.
right? And dealing
Yeah.
with that. So you're almost forced to learn. The second thing is in business, doing this stuff as a return, right? And it's not guaranteed, but you can see the return. Whereas if you level yourself up as an employee, there may or may not be a return, especially if you're in a union mentality
Yeah.
company, even though it's white collar, you find yourself being held down.
It's capped. Absolutely. I think self development in general as a term, I guess there's different levels of it too. Like we talk about Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, Profit First, like all these types of things. I think it appeals more to business owners. But as an example, my mother's not a business owner, but she's always been in a spirituality, self development in that realm. And I think that's still self development, right? That just attracts, it's a different type. It's mindset focused, but it's a little bit different. And that one isn't only unique to business owners, right? I think that's anyone could be attracted to that. So yeah, I would also say there are different types of self development. The most common type, like we're talking about Tony Robbins, I agree. I think it attracts entrepreneurs more than anything.
And you mentioned spirituality. Are there other types of self development you've seen or noticed as you've traveled?
You know, I this one probably goes into there's the self development, which is knowledge increasing, right? You're reading people's biographies, you're doing things just out of curiosity. But if you think about it, I guess no, it's a mindset level up or a spiritual level up. That's mostly what it is. I guess you can mention that there's a physical component to it, where I do think if people who sign up for Ironmans and go through that, they are doing self development, not just on their body, but their mind by going through a lot of those endurance sports and things like that. And that's native to anyone who wants to do that, whoever that attracts. One of my best friends is a math school teacher. He's an endurance athlete too, which is, and I'm sure, I would go to him for different things because I think the way he thinks about it is very different from somebody else. So yeah, I guess those would be the three: it's spiritual, it's mental, and as well it's fitness. Those would be different ways of leveling up.
And I don't think people realize that they all actually go together well.
Mm,
And a lot of times they spill over into each other if you allow it. Some people get very
well
narrow
said.
focused and they lose the bigger scheme of that.
Yeah. One of the so I run Made This franchise, and our first franchisee, his name is David. I knew him before we started franchising, and he is a meditation coach.
Hmm.
He was always into Vedic meditation. He actually was entrepreneur, is still an entrepreneur, but previously was entrepreneur, had a massive locksmith business, has a digital marketing agency, had made a bunch of acquisitions, got really into spirituality and meditation, sold a lot of that to become focused on meditation. And now he's getting back into business in a bigger way. He now owns 3 Made This locations. And I always ask him, like, do you think these go hand in hand, entrepreneurship and meditation? He said, absolutely. The better I am at meditation, at spirituality, the better decisions I make in entrepreneurship, the more fun I have with it, the bigger I grow. So he was saying the more he got into spirituality, the bigger his businesses grew. So kind of to your point, Rocky, like if you're leveling yourself up anywhere, it probably has effects on all of them, everything you're doing.
We saw that a lot with physical and money. I used to see that a lot. People who got successful physically started to get successful money-wise. And people who got success money-wise tended to start to get success physically.
Why is that?
Because all of a sudden you believe you can do something that you didn't think you could do. And so now that you believe you can do something, then you start to do it in other parts of your life. Success begets success. So even though they might not be an entrepreneur, they still start to go, oh, I can be successful outside of what I was told or believed about myself. And so it starts to leak into other areas.
Yeah. You've shattered the glass ceiling in one area, so you keep thinking, why can't I shatter it in other areas? It's possible.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
So what made you start the business, or how did that kind of come to be?
I always knew eventually I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, right? I always thought I would. My parents had a small enterprise with their video rental stores, and it would always call to me. So I knew at some point I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't sure what kind. And I think that desire seeped in with this whole concept of lifestyle design and travel, where I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to follow the 4-hour work week, become a digital nomad. I get entrepreneurship, I get travel. Like, this is great. And so I started trying to find what are like, quote unquote, digital nomad-esque businesses. So that's like early days of when I was researching e-commerce, digital marketing, drop shipping, affiliate marketing. I was trying all these things. All of it flopped, right? And it was tough to do on the side, but a lot of it just flopped. And finally, one day I was on Reddit, and then there's a subreddit called Entrepreneur where people are talking about different things they're doing. And a guy posted how he started a cleaning company. And I was like, cleaning company? Like, all right, whatever. Let me try this out. And, I started with my mother originally. I also wanted to start a business to help my parents financially because video rental stores were not doing that well in the 2010s. So, my mom and I were trying to find different things that they could do, especially she could do at home since she was getting older. I was like, all right, let's give this a shot. Let's see how it goes. And the cleaning business started working. And I started to figure it out and realize, oh, you know what? The competition kind of sucks. Most people don't pick up their phones. Most people don't have a good website. They don't even have a booking page. If you just do like the bare minimum, you're competing against locals who don't know what they're doing versus when I was doing e-commerce drop shipping, you're competing against the world, right? So that was kind of an aha moment. And at first I was like, well, this is great, but let me go find a business I could actually run remotely because this is a local cleaning business. This is not going to be good for my digital nomad journey. Eventually I realized, wait a second, the only thing I'm actually doing locally is interviewing cleaners because cleaners go straight from their homes to the job site. Everything can be done remotely. So finally realized, wow, this is actually working well, dove fully into it, did it 2 years as a side hustle. So I was working in private equity at nighttime. I would work on my business. My mother would help me out during the day. Rocky, I do like lunchtime. I'd tell the cleaners, hey, come outside of my corporate building. I'd run down and hand them cash, like just like pay for their jobs. Didn't know what I was doing. Everyone thought I was a drug dealer. But finally, after a couple of years, hit my freedom number, which is a certain base level of money, which would pay my normal expenses. And that's when I decided to pull the trigger and say, all right, let me do this full time and start traveling.
So you had already started this prior to your traveling and when you were leaving your job.
Correct. Yeah. So I think the level of income I hit was around $3,000 a month, where I felt it was comfortable for me to leave.
And I do want to break a myth. The 4-hour work week, Tim works like a lot more than 4 hours.
Yep.
And so do most people. It's a great catchy title, but the reality is in entrepreneurship, you tend to work a lot more until you can work your way out of the business at some point.
Yeah. I'd be bored working only 4 hours, to be honest. I think most people who are driven people would. So like, can I work only 4 hours? Yeah, probably. But the business wouldn't grow as much as I want. I would be twiddling my thumbs. But the beauty is like, I could scale it down and up depending on what's happening in life. Right. So that is the nice lever to pull.
And that's the key. And clearly you figured out how to build a remote team around the world and be able to manage it from a laptop. And that is, I think, possible. I think a lot of people see roadblocks again, because you've been everywhere. You start to see through roadblocks that I think a lot of people just don't even realize. And I've noticed that more and more about myself. I'm like, wow, I really live in a bubble. And
Hmm.
this is it's an interesting bubble. And it's not often that we get outside our bubbles. When you travel, you absolutely do. But otherwise, you tend to be stuck in that echo chamber. And social media makes sure you stay within your echo chamber so
Yep.
that you get stuck there. Now, you're also a fan of Profit First. You used that for your business, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I implemented it a few years ago, and it's been absolutely game changing, especially like for the way my mind works. It's perfect.
What was it that made it so game changer for you?
You know, I like simplicity when it comes to things. Like I was in finance, but I was never good at the modeling stuff. Like I could do it because I needed to, but I wasn't the finance guy. Yeah, that wasn't what my strengths were. And so even with my business, like making informed decisions, I was kind of like, well, do I have enough money in my account? I guess I do. All right, let's just spend the money. Right. It was very all right, let's just do it. And I think this is how most people operate. What I liked about the profit first system is it made it equally dumb for someone like me, right? Who wants the simplicity of saying, like, all right, we're going to save for profit here. You're going to save for taxes here. You're going to do this stuff. Whatever's left over, Neel, you could spend this money. So every day I could be like, okay, Neel, you have this amount of money to spend. And it just simplified it for me. And I I operate everything like that. Like even with investments, if I want to invest in real estate, I have a fund as part of like my investment account that says real estate investment fund, and I put money there. And my financial advisor is always like, hey, why don't you just put it here and allocate it? I'm like, no. I want a separate account that says it. That's the only way I'm going to know it's there. And that's what makes it real for me. So to be honest, it just made it it brought it down to my level, right? And that was helpful for me.
And this is where people get it wrong. It's exactly what you said. It's psychological, and you have to have that separate fund with that name in your head. And when you put it in, like that guy said, with the other money, it doesn't work. It definitely needs to be separated. You know what? You could have an eating out dinner tonight fund, and then if you knew you were going to stay within whatever the fund is, you could have appetizers and drinks and dessert instead of the entree.
Show it to my mom. Like, check it out. I have it saved.
Yeah, we're allowed to spend $100 tonight. It doesn't matter what we spend it on, you know?
Yeah. Rocky, do you use a similar system when it comes to like your personal bank account? Or do you just have, here's my checking account?
The whole reason I partnered with Profit First and Mike was because I was like, this is the way I've been doing my money since I was 21, right? I always had multiple bank accounts for multiple purposes, multiple time frames. Like, okay, this is the long-term retirement account. This is the cash emergency account. This is the ability to, buy cars, do things, and have that flexibility account. Yep. And so I've always had pre and post tax money, which I didn't really notice up front. But what that did was when you have post tax money saved, if you want to go buy rental property, you stroke a check. It's no big deal. I can sell this stock and I'm not stuck inside of rules of a 401k or all of those types of things. So yes, I absolutely believe it for the personal side. And actually, so when I grew up, we used to have passbook saving, and a passbook savings account actually paid 5.25%, which is amazing. But they also used to have Christmas Club, and every year people would put $5 a week into their Christmas Club, and when Christmas came, they had the cash ready and they could go spend it on Christmas. And so these were the ways people used to think and behave before you could just swipe and tap and no idea where your money disappeared.
I don't know why I don't do this. It's so many things you do in your business that you don't bring to your personal life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why we have this distinction.
And vice versa.
Yeah. I'm literally after this call going to go to my Chase account and create an account called Fun Money, because I have my checking account, but in my mind I'm like, no, that's my checking account. I don't want to spend the money, but if I have like play money and put 5% into there, that would relieve the guilt when you spend money on stuff.
You should also have a self-development fund, whether it's in your company or outside of your company. You can put a good chunk of money in the self-development fund. And then it, when you want to go do something and it's thousands upon thousands, you're like, hey, this is what it's for. And it literally takes all the emotion out of the choices. And
Yep.
you are free to then do it. But
Yep.
you don't do it until you have the money. It's like, well, I want to go on that thing. Well, I'm short $3,000, so let me go hustle.
Yeah.
And then you reward yourself. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Keeps it simple. My bookkeeper hates profit first, but that's what they all do.
We have this argument all the time. And it's quite silly because at the end of the day, yes, you have 5 bank accounts. One of them, all the money comes in, and one of them, all the money goes out. The other 3, barely nothing happens.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's really much work. And you're already doing the work for the money coming in and going out anyway. So and it's all automated now with QuickBooks or whatever. So it's silly for them to do that. It's mental. It's not reality of what the situation is. Once they start to see it and they start to see the success, then they all start to want to do it. Then they start telling their clients about it. So you just got to show them it works over time. So this kind of begs the question, because this is the question very few people can answer. How much is enough, right? How do you find that balance to go, you know what? I have enough. I'm just going to enjoy life. I don't need to make necessarily or grow the business or do more. I'm still going to run it and I'm still going to be involved, but I don't need to keep chasing.
Yeah. It's this is like the never ending question, right? Like, and I think that the most elusive thing is not how much money can I make? It's when am I going to feel like it's enough? And Rocky, I've thought about this a lot, especially coming back from like the 6-month stint I have in Rwanda. So I'll give you my thoughts and I'd love to hear yours on this one. I think there's 2 components. There's the reality of the situation is, do you actually have enough? And then the bigger part is there's the emotional part, and the mental part is, do you feel like you have enough? I think the tactical part is easier to solve. You talk to a financial advisor, you get the numbers together, it's black or white. Do I have enough? Okay, cool. Let's pretend you do, right? And I think a lot of people in this situation is you probably have enough if you actually talk to someone and got your numbers straight, talk to Rocky, get your numbers straight, understand that you have enough or you're trending towards having enough. But why do you not feel like you have enough? Why aren't you getting this sense of calm? A lot of people think once they finally hit a money milestone, all of a sudden they're gonna be like, oh, I nirvana, like I have enough and I've hit this epiphany of enough. And the truth is, you spent all this time developing a muscle which has nothing to do with the feeling of having enough, right? Just because you get really good at business, that's a completely different skill set than learning how to be content and happy. Those are not related at all. Somewhat related, but achieving one doesn't mean you're going to achieve the other necessarily. But people think they're going to hit a certain point and have enough. And for me, this happened, Rocky, where everyone has milestones, right? I want to make 10K a month. Cool. I want to make 20K a month. Cool. I want to hit 20 franchisees. Cool. Guess what? The goalpost moved. I had that sense of enough for a week, maybe 2 weeks max. And then all of a sudden it moves. And the hard part for me is understanding why is it moving? And why I know it's no longer the external, just because I have these things doesn't mean I'm going to have the feeling of enough. So therefore it's an internal problem. And, I don't have the answer, Rocky. I think a lot of times it's environmental. And the example I gave is I wrote a post on social media on LinkedIn recently about the whisper of different countries. Now, I just got back from Rwanda. I spent 6 months over there working remotely. My wife was helping out. She's a physician and I was able to work remotely, and it's an incredible place. And over there, I felt at peace. Every day I'd wake up, I'd have a nice easy morning. It felt calm. And I remember seeing on my balcony, I'd see a beautiful view of the rolling hills. And I think, this is enough. I don't feel like the need of getting more and more and more and more. And the cool part is I was still accomplishing everything. We still awarded 8 franchisees. We were growing, but I just had such a nice sense of calm. And I got back to LA a couple weeks ago, and I'm already feeling this seeping in of Neo, have more. These people are making more money. The conversations go around there. It's a fast-paced city. More, grow. And I have this feeling of, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. I need to go faster. I need to get more productive. I need to do more to have enough. And that's why I think a lot of it is environmental. what does where you're living, what do your surroundings dictate to you? What's the culture of where you're at dictating to you? And then there's the internal component of have you done enough self-development to actually catch yourself having these thoughts and correcting these thoughts? That's the harder part. It's not the tactical part. It's the internal side. What are your thoughts, Rocky?
I agree with you. I think the one aha that kind of came from me was I have enough for now. And if I need more, I can always ramp up if I have to. I know how and I can do it. So I don't feel like I have to. It's like if something came up or something changed and I needed to make more money, I know how to make more money. I'll just go do it when I have to. But I don't want to do what you talked about. I don't want to run around all day. I want to wake up and have a slow morning.
Yeah.
And if this is going to interfere with that, then the answer is no.
Rocky, how do you think about it if people ask you like, hey, Rocky, you just talked about the Great Depression after the Roaring 20s, or what if something happens and you get disabled and you're not able to make more money later? I need to save money right now to have enough in case of an economic downturn, in case of a disability. How do you think about that?
I think there is a base level of enough, right? And for everyone, that base level is a little bit different. The good thing is if you go into a depression, if you have what you had was enough, it's now actually worth more. So you're okay. It's when you go into hyperinflation that you no matter how much you had, you're in serious trouble because it's worth less and less and less every day. So there's kind of that. There are financial ways you can kind of do it, but none of them really do well with inflation. But again, it comes back to, do I have enough for now? And if I became totally disabled, do I have enough that I'm not, on the street? Is my housing and the basic stuff covered? I mean, no one's going to be able to save enough to have round the clock care at $300,000 a year necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, and that goes back to the other part of it. Am I keeping myself healthy? And am I doing the healthy things to prevent that from occurring and making sure? I mean, you can't prevent everything and you can't prevent the car accident, but I can prevent a good chunk of it. So am I living a life to be able to do that? And take you, for example. What if you just said, well, you know what? Let's say my health goes away and I do need 24/7 care. Can I buy a ticket first class to India where I can get 24/7 care for a fraction of what it costs in America? And would I be happy with that? And the reality is probably.
Yeah. Or I guess even the other side of like, if you're actually worried about that, buy yourself an expensive insurance policy for long-term disability. Now, like insurance companies could be scams, right? Like, so I'm not condoning it or I'm not saying it's good, but there's ways of hedging bets, I would probably say as well, if you're worried about certain risks.
There are ways of hedging bets, and I'm big into longevity, and not longevity in living longer, but longevity in living healthier longer.
Yep.
And, I think for people who are aging, do you have Alzheimer's and dementia stuff? Is that within your gene pool, your family pool? Have you looked at that? Do you go get scans and things to stay at the early stage of it? Because those are diseases you can figure out if you've got a problem 15 years ahead of time, in which case go by the long-term care, but also build a relationship so that you have a support system and you've got a plan for what that looks like and how you're going to go do it. I think a lot of these things we just don't think about or we refuse to think about. And so then we worry about them, and that's unfortunate. I think, though, the other half of it is the people you're surrounded by right now where you live are just like the concept of not having more just doesn't like register in that bubble.
And I think people hide behind the concept of saying, I'm a high achiever. I don't ever want enough. Like, I hear a lot of people say that. And in my mind, those are different things. You could still have a feeling of enough and still achieve more. Like, I've
Yeah.
only come to realize that where you don't need this chip on your shoulder to get more. It's taken a lot of rewiring to remove that correlation. But I do think in an ideal world, that is uncorrelated.
I think it's uncorrelated. And the real question is, are you disappointed because the Rolls Royce you just bought is last year's model and the guy got the new model that looks a little nicer, or the slightly bigger house with a slightly bigger boat? I mean,
Yeah.
that you hear that, especially in Los Angeles. I moved into my favorite, my dream mansion, and it was amazing until I looked out the back window and saw the house behind me was bigger than mine.
Mm-hmm. Comparison is a thief of joy.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Are you going to keep comparing, or can you let go of the comparison? Because I think if you can let go of the comparison, if you can be content in where you are in this moment and be happy with it, then it's okay. And if something changes, do you think you have the ability to pivot and do something? Like, I don't know, if they came out with cleaning robots, do you know how to pivot? Do you know how to do something different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would buy the cleaning robots and start selling those,
Yeah. Someone's got to repair the robot now, right? Someone's got to. There's always opportunity out there if you're willing to go after it. And I think people just put themselves in a cage.
Yeah.
And they define their cage, which we talked about starting in the bubble. So when you let go of the cage and you look in the mirror and you're okay with what you see, everything else is pretty cool.
Yeah. And it becomes easier. It's fluid. It's not like you're walking around with a chain on your foot because you're like, I need more. I have to do something. It's not like this scarcity mindset with it. It makes things more fluid.
It very much does. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I think it comes down to being as present as you can and being surrounded by community. So investing in the relationships, investing in having enough, like we talked about, I think that's the key.
You mentioned another word there that we didn't even really talk about, being present. I think most people aren't present in this country. It's probably easier to be present in Rwanda.
Yep.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I think I learned that life's a choose your own adventure book, right? Do you remember those books where you get to the end of the page and you decide what you want to do? There's not a linear way of doing things. There's infinite ways of doing things, infinite ways of living. And you could really make it your own. Like there's not a singular path to wealth. There's not a singular path of how to actually do stuff. And it's refreshing to understand that it's all open slate. You don't have to do anything. And there's millions of people outside of your bubble who are living in a completely different way. It's normal.
I'm amazed at how many people who can't see any other path.
It's because they're in the bubble, like you said, Rocky. Once you get out of the bubble, you realize how many people live in different ways.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I'd say take big risk, try a bunch of stuff, and you'll figure it out and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
I wish I did.
I wish I had done a lot more at a younger age and tried more things and taken more opportunities. I grew up in that bubble of you must go to college, you must do this, and you can't leave that path.
Yep. Take bigger risks.
If people would like to learn more about you, about your franchising opportunity and how you do things, how can they do that?
Yeah, so my franchise is called Made This Franchise. That's MAIDTHIS franchise. You could go to madethisfranchise.com, check it out in case you're interested. Personally, I'm posting a lot more on YouTube. I post about my travel stories, about tactical stuff, everything around that. My YouTube channel is Neel B Parekh. So Neel B Parekh. You can find me on YouTube, and that's where I'm posting most of my content nowadays.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky.
Thanks for listening today. Before you go, I want you to pause and ask yourself, what old money scripts and other programs are still running your life that no longer serve you? What would enough actually look like for you? This is the question most people don't know how to answer. And if you stop chasing what everyone else tells you to want or do, what would your life based on your design look like instead? If this conversation with Neel made you think, well, who else could use it as well? Maybe a friend, maybe your spouse. Share the episode and start a conversation together to design life on your terms, because that's what it's all about. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.